My name is Hope Anderson, and at 34 years old, I never expected to watch a $134 million deal collapse in real time. After a decade in product development at TechVision, I thought I had seen every form of corporate sabotage possible. But nothing prepared me for watching our chief operating officer deliberately destroy the platform I had built while powerful executives looked on in horror. What saved my career and reputation wasn't just my expertise. It was the audit log system I had quietly implemented 3 weeks earlier. Before I dive into how documentation saved my career and exposed the ultimate workplace betrayal, let me know where you're watching from. Drop a like and subscribe if you've ever had to protect yourself with receipts in a professional setting. My journey to that fateful day began long before I joined TechVision. After graduating from MIT with a degree in computer science, I worked my way through 3 promising startups. Each one taught me valuable lessons about building products, leading teams, and navigating the complex dynamics of the tech world. When Marcus Thompson, the founder and CEO of TechVision, personally reached out to recruit me 4 years ago, I was intrigued by his vision for an AI-driven customer service optimization platform. Hope you understand both the technical side and the human element, Marcus told me during our first meeting. That combination is exactly what we need to take our product to the next level. I joined as director of product and immediately began building my team. Over the next year, I assembled 12 brilliant developers, each bringing unique skills to the table. Jennifer Wilson, our head of quality assurance, quickly became my closest ally and confidant. Her attention to detail complemented my big-picture thinking, and her unwavering integrity made her someone I could trust implicitly. Then there was Blake Davidson, our lead developer. Blake was brilliant but socially awkward. He could solve complex technical problems that left others baffled, but he struggled with office politics and communication. Still, his loyalty to the product and dedication to excellence made him invaluable. Under my leadership, TechVision grew rapidly. Our AI-driven platform revolutionized how companies handled customer service. We reduced response times, improved satisfaction scores, and helped businesses save millions. Within 3 years, we reached $30 million in annual revenue, impressive for a company our size. The growth attracted attention, and 18 months ago, Marcus brought in Ethan Reynolds as Chief Operating Officer. With his Harvard MBA and experience at larger tech companies, Ethan seemed like the perfect addition to help scale operations. "Hope I'm excited to work with you," Ethan said during our first one-on-one meeting. "Your product expertise combined with my operational experience will make us unstoppable." Initially, Ethan was everything we needed. He streamlined processes, improved our financial projections, and brought a level of polish to our executive team. He always complimented my work in public and seemed genuinely supportive of my vision for the product. The first sign that acquisition might be on the table came during a board meeting 6 months ago. Marcus mentioned that several larger companies had expressed interest in our technology, but it was just talk until representatives from BuyerTech reached out directly. BuyerTech was a publicly traded company valued at over $5 billion. Their interest was serious, a potential acquisition worth $134 million. For a company of our size, this was astronomical. Everyone from the board members to the newest interns buzzed with excitement. For me personally, the acquisition would mean a substantial payout from my stock options, enough to finally buy my dream home and set aside funds to care for my aging parents. But beyond the money, having our technology incorporated into BuyerTech's ecosystem would expand our impact exponentially. The final hurdle was a comprehensive demonstration of our platform's capabilities. The technical team from BuyerTech wanted to see firsthand how our AI systems worked. Marcus appointed me to lead the preparation for this crucial demo. "Nobody understands the product better than you do," he said. "This is your baby. Show them why it's worth every penny they're offering." The team celebrated that night at our favorite restaurant. Ethan raised a toast to my leadership and promised his full support. "With Hope at the helm of this demo, the deal is as good as done," he said, clinking glasses with me. I spent the next 2 weeks working late nights, refining every aspect of the presentation. We created sample customer scenarios, prepared detailed technical documentation, and ran countless tests to ensure everything would run flawlessly. In our initial strategy sessions, Ethan seemed fully engaged and supportive. He offered valuable insights about what would impress the BuyerTech executives and praised my presentation approach. Jennifer and Blake both contributed their expertise, and our collective enthusiasm was palpable. We were on the verge of something transformative, and the collaborative spirit of those early planning days felt like the best of TechVision's culture. "This is our moment," I told my team after a particularly productive session. "Everything we've built together is about to be recognized on a whole new level." None of us had any idea how quickly things would change. The first cracks appeared during our initial strategy meeting with BuyerTech's team. As I began walking through our technical capabilities, Ethan repeatedly interrupted to clarify points I had already explained clearly. "What hope means is," he would say before restating my exact words in a slightly different way. After the third interruption, I noticed Richard Hamilton, BuyerTech's lead buyer, looking at me with curiosity. Was he wondering who was actually in charge of the product? That evening, I received an email from Ethan requesting several changes to the demo structure. The requests made little technical sense, and when I asked for clarification, his response was vague. "Trust me on this, Hope. I know what will resonate with their executive team." I called Jennifer that night to voice my concerns. "Am I being oversensitive? Or is Ethan trying to sideline me?" I asked her. "You're not imagining things," Jennifer confirmed. "I noticed it too. He's positioning himself as the product authority when everyone knows that's your role." The next day, I discovered that my presentation materials had been altered before being sent to the BuyerTech team. Nothing major, but certain technical specifications had been removed, and some of the language around our competitive advantages had been watered down. When I tried to discuss this with Marcus, he seemed distracted. "The lawyers are drowning me in paperwork for this deal," he explained. "Can you work this out with Ethan? I trust you both to handle the presentation details." But Ethan was becoming increasingly difficult to pin down. He started suggesting we bring in external consultants to strengthen the demo, despite our team having intimate knowledge of our own product. "These consultants have experience with acquisitions of this scale," he insisted. "We need their perspective." My uneasiness grew when Blake mentioned that Ethan had met with the development team without inviting me. He asked a lot of questions about system access and admin privileges. Blake reported, fidgeting uncomfortably. "It felt weird discussing those things without you there." The situation escalated during a company-wide meeting where Ethan openly questioned one of my technical decisions in front of the entire staff. "Are we sure that the authentication system Hope designed can handle the load BuyerTech will want to see?" he asked, looking around the room rather than at me. "It seems like we might need to consider alternatives." I was blindsided. The authentication system had been thoroughly tested and had never shown any performance issues. More troubling was that Ethan had never raised this concern in any of our private meetings. Later that day, Blake approached my desk, looking nervous. "Hope, I thought you should know that Ethan asked me to make some code changes to the demo version without going through the usual approval process," he said quietly. "He said it was to streamline for the presentation, but it seemed off to me." That night, I started a detailed documentation journal. I recorded every conversation, email, and meeting related to the demo preparation. I also implemented stricter version control on our demo environment, requiring dual authentication for any significant changes. The next morning, I confronted Ethan directly in his office. "I feel like there's been a breakdown in communication," I said calmly. "If you have concerns about the demo, I need to hear them directly, rather than through the team." Ethan leaned back in his chair, the picture of relaxed confusion. "Hope, I think you're misreading the situation. I'm just trying to make sure this demo is perfect. We all want the same thing here." His words were reassuring, but his eyes remained cold. That night was my first bout of acquisition-related insomnia. The pattern continued over the next few days. During a technical call with BuyerTech, one of their engineers directed a question specifically to me. Before I could answer, Ethan jumped in. "Great question," he said. "Let me address that before Hope gets into the technical weeds." I also noticed that Ethan was taking detailed notes whenever vulnerabilities or limitations in our system were discussed. Not unusual for a COO, perhaps, but combined with everything else, it raised my suspicions. The final red flag came when our IT director mentioned that Ethan had requested admin access to the demo environment to better understand the system architecture. That evening, I called a former colleague who had experienced similar undermining at her previous company. "Document everything," she advised. "This sounds deliberate, not accidental. Someone who repeatedly sidelines a product leader before a major acquisition usually has an agenda." For the first time, I considered that what was happening might be more than just Ethan's ego or communication style. It might be deliberate sabotage. But why would he undermine a deal that would benefit everyone, including himself? I had no answers yet, but my instincts were screaming that something was very wrong. 3 weeks before the scheduled demo, I discovered unexplained changes in the codebase. Someone had modified critical APIs without going through our standard review process. When I traced the changes, they had been committed using a developer account I didn't recognize. "This makes no sense," Blake said when I showed him. "These changes don't improve anything. If anything, they make the system more vulnerable to failures during high-load scenarios, exactly what we'd expect during a demo." Before I could investigate further, Ethan requested an emergency meeting with Marcus and me. During the meeting, he criticized my leadership directly. "I'm concerned that Hope isn't prioritizing the right elements for this demonstration," he told Marcus. "The technical team seems confused about the direction, and we're running behind schedule." I was stunned. My team had hit every internal milestone, and no one had expressed confusion to me. "That hasn't been communicated to me," I responded. "We had a team check-in yesterday, and everyone reported being on track." Marcus looked concerned. "Hope if there are issues, we need to address them immediately. This demo cannot fail." Of course, I agreed, but this is the first I'm hearing of any problems. After the meeting, I learned that rumors were circulating that I was difficult and technologically outdated. Several team members seemed distant when I approached them, and conversations would stop abruptly when I entered the break room. Later that week, I accidentally overheard a conversation between Ethan and a board member discussing who might replace me post-acquisition. Hope built a great foundation, but BuyerTech will want someone with enterprise experience leading the product team after integration, Ethan was saying. "I've already identified some potential candidates." My stomach dropped. Not only was I being undermined during the acquisition process, but plans were already being made to replace me afterward. The situation worsened when Marcus called me into his office, visibly frustrated. "BuyerTech just contacted me about delays in receiving some technical documentation," he said. "They were told by someone on our side that you were holding up the process. What's going on, Hope?" I was speechless. This is the first I'm hearing about any requested documentation. I finally managed. When Marcus showed me the email thread, I noticed I hadn't been copied on any of the previous communications. That evening, while reviewing recent emails about the demo, I realized I'd been excluded from several important threads. Decisions were being made about my product without my knowledge or input. Blake confirmed my growing suspicions the next day. Ethan has been holding separate strategy sessions with some of the developers, he admitted. "He told us not to mention them to you because he didn't want to add to your stress level." Jennifer discovered another concerning development when reviewing materials sent to BuyerTech. "The feature list they received doesn't match what we actually built," she reported. "Several of our most innovative capabilities aren't even mentioned, while other features are overpromised." That weekend, I called an emergency work session with Blake and Jennifer. We reviewed the entire demo environment and discovered that critical authentication systems had been modified in ways that made them less stable. "This is deliberate," Blake concluded after hours of analysis. "These changes look innocent individually, but collectively they create multiple potential failure points." That night, I made a decision that would ultimately save my career. I implemented a comprehensive audit log system that would track every action taken in the demo environment, who made changes when they were made, and exactly what was modified. I explained to Blake why this was necessary. "If something goes wrong during this demo, I need to know exactly what happened and why," I told him. "This isn't about assigning blame. It's about protecting the integrity of what we've built." When I raised my growing concerns at the next team meeting, Ethan dismissed them as paranoia. "Hope you're putting unnecessary pressure on your team with all these conspiracy theories," he said with a condescending smile. "Let's focus on preparing a great demo, not looking for problems that don't exist." Several team members nodded in agreement, and I realized how effectively I'd been isolated. People I had hired, mentored, and worked alongside for years now looked at me with suspicion. At the company happy hour that Friday, I sat alone at the bar while Ethan chatted animatedly with my team. Jennifer eventually joined me, looking troubled. "It's like they've forgotten everything you've done for this company," she said. "But I haven't, and neither has Blake." That weekend, I seriously contemplated resigning. The stress was affecting my health, and the environment had become toxic. but I couldn't abandon the product I had built from the ground up. I couldn't let down the team members who still trusted me, and something deep inside wouldn't let me walk away without understanding what was really happening. My determination was reinforced when Blake discovered an unauthorized backdoor access point had been created in the demo environment. This would allow someone to make changes that wouldn't be visible through normal monitoring channels, he explained. I took my findings to Marcus, hoping he would finally see the pattern. Instead, he seemed annoyed by the entire situation. "Hope I need you and Ethan to work together on this," he said firmly. "Whatever personal issues are happening between you two, set them aside. This acquisition is too important." I drove home that night in tears, feeling utterly helpless. Everything I had worked for was being systematically undermined, and no one in power seemed willing to see it. I collapsed on my couch, emotionally exhausted. But sometime around midnight, something shifted inside me. If no one would listen to my concerns now, I would make sure I had irrefutable evidence if things went wrong. I strengthened the audit log system, ensuring it captured every possible action in the demo environment, and backed up the data to a secure server only I could access. If Ethan was planning something, I would be ready. The morning of the demo arrived with perfect, cruel irony. Brilliant sunshine streaming through the windows of our headquarters as I checked every aspect of the system one final time. Everything was functioning perfectly. The presentation was loaded, the demonstration scenarios were prepared, and the platform was running optimally. Despite the weeks of interference and undermining, we were ready. I arrived early, dressed in my most professional navy blue suit, hair pulled back, projecting the confidence I needed everyone to see, regardless of how my stomach churned with anxiety. The conference room had been transformed for the occasion. New furniture, elaborate catering, and professionally printed materials at each seat. At 9:30, the receptionist called to announce that the BuyerTech executives had arrived. 7 of them filed into our lobby, led by Richard Hamilton, their lead buyer, a tall, serious man with silver-streaked hair and piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they landed on. Marcus greeted them warmly, making introductions as we moved toward the conference room. I shook hands with each executive, making mental notes of their names and roles. Richard's handshake was firm, his gaze direct. "I've heard impressive things about your platform, Miss Anderson," he said. "I'm particularly interested in seeing how the AI learning algorithms adapt to new customer interaction patterns." "That's one of our system's greatest strengths," I responded with genuine enthusiasm. "I'm looking forward to demonstrating it for you." We settled into the conference room and Marcus began his introduction, highlighting TechVision's journey, growth metrics, and vision for the future. The atmosphere was positive, with attentive nods from the BuyerTech team. My presentation materials were queued up on the main screen, ready for my portion to begin. As Marcus concluded his overview, he turned to me with a smile. "And now, Hope will take you through our platform's capabilities and technical architecture." I stood tablet in hand, ready to begin, when Ethan suddenly rose from his seat. "Actually," he said with a confident smile, "as COO, I'll be leading this technical demonstration. Hope has done excellent preparatory work, but given the importance of this presentation, we want to ensure you see the big picture from an executive perspective." The room fell silent. Marcus looked confused, but didn't contradict Ethan. Richard Hamilton glanced between us, clearly sensing tension. Before I could object, Ethan physically moved to the center position where I had been standing. As he passed me, he muttered with a smirk, "Showtime," and gently but firmly nudged me toward an empty chair at the side of the room. I felt the blood drain from my face, but maintained my professional composure. Making a scene would only harm the company's prospects. I took the seat, hands trembling slightly beneath the table where no one could see. Ethan began smoothly navigating through the introduction slides I had prepared. For the first 10 minutes, everything proceeded normally. He was articulate and charismatic, though he glossed over several technical details I would have emphasized. Then he transitioned to the live demonstration portion. "Now let me show you the actual platform in action," he announced, logging into the system using his own credentials. The first warning sign came when the customer dashboard loaded without the customization options we had developed. Ethan continued talking as if nothing was amiss, but I noticed Richard frowning slightly. "Can we see the natural language processing capabilities you mentioned earlier?" Richard asked. "Absolutely," Ethan replied, clicking to that section, but the module failed to load properly. "Just a momentary glitch," Ethan said, with a forced laugh, trying again. To my horror, I watched as feature after feature began disappearing from the interface. Error messages started appearing on the main projection screen. First one, then three, then a cascade. Database connection failure. Authentication error. Module unavailable. Richard Hamilton leaned forward, brow furrowed. Is this typical behavior of your system? Not at all, Ethan responded, his voice tight. I'm not sure what's happening. But I knew exactly what was happening. I was watching our system being systematically dismantled in real time. Someone was deleting components, removing access permissions, and shutting down servers, all while Ethan was standing at the front of the room. I started to stand, intending to intervene, but Ethan shot me a warning glance. Hope, please let me handle this. Your interruption will only make things more confusing for our guests. Marcus, now visibly alarmed, looked to me questioningly. Before I could respond, another error message flashed across the screen, followed by the worst possible outcome. The entire system went dark, displaying only a connection error message. The room fell silent. Richard Hamilton closed his laptop with a definitive click that seemed to echo in the stillness. We don't buy companies that delete their product mid-pitch, he said coldly, standing up. This demonstration suggests either incompetence or deception, neither of which inspires confidence in an acquisition target. Please, Mr. Hamilton. Marcus began, panic evident in his voice. This is clearly some technical issue that we can resolve. In my experience, Mr. Thompson, Richard interrupted. Technical issues during demonstrations are rarely accidental when 9 figures are on the table. He gestured to his team. Thank you for your time, but we'll be withdrawing our offer effective immediately. The BuyerTech executives gathered their materials and filed out of the room, leaving behind half-empty coffee cups and the shattered remains of our $134 million deal. The silence that followed their departure was deafening. Marcus stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. The other TechVision executives looked shell-shocked. Ethan, meanwhile, had assumed an expression of devastated confusion that I knew was entirely fabricated. What the hell just happened? Marcus finally exploded, slamming his hand on the table. Ethan immediately went into damage control mode. I have no idea what caused that system failure, he said, voice laden with practiced distress. Hope's team assured me everything was tested and stable. Every eye in the room turned to me. This is catastrophic, Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. You were responsible for ensuring that demo was flawless. How could you let this happen? I didn't, I began, but Ethan cut me off. The logs will show exactly what happened, he said. But right now we need to try to salvage this relationship with BuyerTech before it's too late. Marcus nodded grimly. Hope, I want you to leave the building now. Consider yourself on administrative leave until we determine exactly what happened here. You've destroyed this company's future. The words hit like physical blows. I gathered my belongings in silence, aware of the stares from colleagues as I walked through the open office. As I passed the development team area, I saw confusion and betrayal on their faces. They believed I had somehow failed them. Ethan was already huddled with Marcus and 2 board members, gesturing emphatically as they began their damage control efforts. I drove home in a dazed, tears streaming down my face. 4 years of work, a product I had poured my heart and soul into, a team I had built from nothing, all apparently destroyed in 20 minutes. My career seemed to be in ruins, my reputation shattered. I had never felt more alone, or more devastated. After hours of cycling between tears and numbness in my apartment, my analytical mind finally began to reassert itself. Something about the system failure didn't make sense. The errors hadn't appeared random or cascading as they would in a genuine technical failure. They had been sequential, methodical, almost as if someone was following a script. I wiped my eyes and opened my laptop. Though I had been escorted out of the building, my credentials still worked for remote access to our secure server, where the audit logs were stored. With shaking hands, I logged in and began reviewing the system events from the demonstration. What I found took my breath away. Every deletion command, every permission change, every server shutdown had been executed using Ethan's credentials. The logs showed activity from his account at the exact moments when features were disappearing from the screen, while he was standing at the front of the room giving the presentation. Either someone else was using his login information, or he had pre-programmed these failures to execute automatically during the demo. I dug deeper, examining timestamps and command structures. There it was. Evidence of script preparation days earlier, also under Ethan's credentials. Small test executions to verify that the destructive commands would work properly. Access to the system at unusual hours, including 3 in the morning the day before the demo. This was no accident. This was deliberate, premeditated sabotage. I called Blake, my voice still unsteady. I need your eyes on something. Can you come over? 30 minutes later, Blake sat at my dining table reviewing the logs on my laptop. His expression grew increasingly grave. This is unequivocal, he confirmed. These are deliberate, destructive actions executed through timed scripts set to trigger during the demo. And they're all linked to Ethan's user account. But why, I asked. Why would he torpedo a deal that would have made him millions, too? Before Blake could respond, there was a knock at my door. Jennifer stood there, her expression a mix of concern and determination. I figured you two would be working on this, she said as she entered, and I have something you need to hear. She sat down heavily on my couch. Yesterday I was working late in the small conference room next to Ethan's office. The door was closed, but the walls are thin. I heard Ethan on a phone call. He said, and I quote, "BuyerTech will be out of the picture by tomorrow afternoon. Then we can proceed with our original plan." Blake and I exchanged startled looks. Did he mention who he was talking to? I asked. No names, Jennifer replied. But he referred to your team at CompTech at one point. CompTech, one of BuyerTech's main competitors, and another company that had reportedly expressed interest in acquiring us. The three of us spent the next several hours digging for connections. Blake found LinkedIn activity showing Ethan had multiple connections to CompTech executives, including several private messages exchanged in recent months. Jennifer discovered that Ethan had scheduled several personal appointments that coincided with CompTech executives being in town. Most damning of all, I uncovered an email thread Ethan had accidentally sent to the wrong Jennifer in the company, Jennifer Parker in accounting instead of Jennifer Wilson, mentioning a meeting with CompTech representatives. The email had been quickly recalled, but Jennifer Parker had already seen it and mentioned it casually to Jennifer Wilson, thinking nothing of it at the time. It makes sense now, Blake said grimly. CompTech's offer was lower than BuyerTech's, but rumor has it they wanted to keep more of the existing management structure intact, except they would demote Marcus and make Ethan CEO of the acquired division. So he sabotaged the BuyerTech deal to clear the path for CompTech. I concluded, the full picture finally coming into focus. We spent the next few hours organizing the evidence into a clear chronological presentation. Everything from the audit logs to the LinkedIn connections to the recalled email and Jennifer's overheard conversation. The case against Ethan was circumstantial but compelling. I stared at the assembled evidence, a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. Even with all this, it's my word against his. And right now, Marcus believes I'm the one who destroyed the deal. You have to take this to Marcus, Jennifer insisted. The logs don't lie. What if he doesn't believe me? What if Ethan has already convinced him that I somehow tampered with the logs to shift blame? Then the company deserves what it gets, Blake said bluntly. But you have to try hope. Not just for yourself, but for everyone who's worked to build this product. I nodded slowly. I'll talk to Marcus first thing tomorrow. But tonight I need to confront Ethan directly. I need to understand why he would do this to a company he claimed to care about. Jennifer and Blake both objected, but my mind was made up. I called Ethan and asked to meet him at the office. Surprisingly, he agreed. An hour later, I sat across from him in his sleek corner office. The building was nearly empty at that hour, just a few security guards and late-working engineers several floors away. I know what you did, I said without preamble, sliding printouts of the audit logs across his desk. Ethan glanced at them dismissively. And what exactly do you think these prove? They prove that you executed a script to systematically destroy our demo while presenting to BuyerTech. They prove you planned it days in advance. They prove you sabotaged a $134 million acquisition. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with cold calculation. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. You know what your problem is. Hope you're too focused on building things. The real money is in controlling things. He tapped the logs. These are interesting, I'll admit. But they're hardly conclusive. Logs can be modified, timestamps can be altered. And even if these are authentic, who's to say? Someone didn't use my credentials without my knowledge. We both know what happened, I said, my voice steady, despite the anger churning inside me. What we know and what we can prove are very different things, he replied. By this time tomorrow, I'll have convinced Marcus and the board that you orchestrated this disaster to maintain control of your precious product rather than let it be acquired. No one will believe you over me. You underestimate how much evidence I've gathered. His expression hardened. And you underestimate how much influence I've built while you were busy coding. Walk away, Hope. Take a generous severance package and find another startup to play with. Push this any further, and I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. I stood gathering the papers. You've miscalculated badly, Ethan. I'm not afraid of you. As I turned to leave, he called after me. It's your career funeral. No one will believe you over me. I walked out without looking back, his threat echoing in my mind. Despite my brave words, I knew the confrontation ahead would be the greatest challenge of my professional life. But I also knew I couldn't live with myself if I didn't fight for the truth. I arrived at Marcus's house at 7 the next morning. I knew he would be home. He always took time to have breakfast with his family, even during crises. His wife answered the door, surprised to see me, but polite as always. Marcus is in his study, she said, leading me through their immaculate home. He's been there all night. Marcus looked up from his laptop, his expression hardening when he saw me. The dark circles under his eyes spoke of a sleepless night. You have some nerve coming here, he said coldly. Do you have any idea the damage control I've been doing since yesterday? I do, I replied calmly. And I'm here because you deserve to know what really happened. I placed my laptop on his desk and opened the presentation I had prepared. Before you say anything else, I need 15 minutes of your time. After that, if you still want me gone, I'll leave and never contact anyone at TechVision again. He hesitated, then nodded curtly. 15 minutes. I started with the audit logs explaining in precise technical detail what they showed, the timestamps of the destructive commands, the clear evidence they came from Ethan's account, and the pattern of test executions in the days leading up to the demo. These could be faked, Marcus interrupted, though I noted his tone had shifted from hostile to skeptical. They could be, I acknowledged, but they're not, and they're just the beginning. I continued methodically through the evidence, the LinkedIn connections, the suspicious meetings, Jennifer's overheard conversation, the misdirected email. As I spoke, Marcus's expression gradually changed from skepticism to concern to shock. Why would he do this? He finally asked. The BuyerTech deal would have made him wealthy too. CompTech offered him something more valuable than money, I explained. Power. Their acquisition offer would have made him CEO of the acquired division and sidelined you to an advisory role. Marcus leaned back in his chair, processing this information. I need to verify these logs independently. Of course, I agreed. Blake can confirm their authenticity. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Blake. I had asked him and Jennifer to come to Marcus's house at 8 if they didn't hear from me. They were outside. Marcus invited them in, and Blake immediately set to work verifying the logs on a separate system. Jennifer provided her first-hand account of the overheard conversation. After 2 hours of intense discussion and technical verification, Marcus finally sat back, his expression grim. I owe you an apology, Hope, he said quietly. I should have trusted you more and questioned Ethan's narrative. We need to act quickly, I urged. Ethan is probably already working to cover his tracks and solidify his version of events with the board. Marcus nodded decisively. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for noon today. I want all 3 of you there with this evidence prepared. I spent the next few hours refining our presentation, focusing on making the technical aspects clear for the non-technical board members. My hands trembled occasionally as I worked. Everything I had built was riding on this meeting. At noon, we gathered in the main conference room, the same room where the disastrous demo had taken place just a day earlier. The board members filed in, their expressions serious. I sat with Blake and Jennifer, acutely aware of the whispers and glances in our direction. Ethan was the last to arrive, striding in confidently with a leather portfolio under his arm. He faltered momentarily when he saw me, clearly surprised by my presence, but quickly recovered his composure. Marcus called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss yesterday's demonstration failure and its implications for the company, he began formally. New information has come to light that requires immediate board attention. Ethan leaned forward, prepared to speak, but Marcus continued. Hope Anderson has brought forward evidence suggesting that yesterday's failure was not a technical malfunction, but a deliberate act of sabotage. Murmurs erupted around the table. Ethan's face remained impassive, but I noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped his pen. "This is absurd," he said smoothly. "Hope is clearly trying to deflect blame for her team's failure." "The evidence speaks for itself," I replied, standing to take control of the presentation screen. "I'll let the board judge its merit." I proceeded through the evidence methodically, emotion-free, focusing solely on facts. The audit logs showing the precise timestamps of destructive commands, the scripts prepared days in advance, the unusual system access in the early morning hours, everything tied directly to Ethan's credentials. As I presented, I watched the board members' expressions shift from skepticism to concern. Ethan attempted to interject several times, but Marcus firmly kept the presentation on track. When I finished the technical portion, Blake confirmed the log's authenticity, explaining in terms the board could understand why they couldn't have been falsified. Jennifer then presented the CompTech connection evidence, the overheard phone conversation, the suspicious meetings, the LinkedIn communications. Throughout this, Ethan maintained his composure, though I could see tension building in his jaw. When we finished, he launched into his counter-narrative. "This is an elaborate attempt to frame me," he insisted. "Hope has clearly manipulated these logs to shift blame. The system failed because her team cut corners on testing. As for these alleged CompTech connections, of course I have professional relationships across the industry. That's my job." He might have been convincing if not for what happened next. An older board member, Susan Chen, who had remained silent throughout the presentations, finally spoke. "Mr. Reynolds, I received some interesting emails this morning," she said quietly. "Would you care to explain why CompTech's CEO reached out to me expressing confusion about why the acquisition timeline had been delayed, an acquisition I knew nothing about until today?" The blood drained from Ethan's face. Susan slid printouts of the emails across the table. Apparently, CompTech's CEO had mistakenly believed that Susan was aware of their acquisition discussions and had referenced specific meetings with Ethan. "I can explain," Ethan began, but his usual smoothness had evaporated. "I think you've explained enough," Marcus cut in coldly. "The board needs to deliberate now." The deliberation was brief. Within 20 minutes, the board voted unanimously to terminate Ethan effective immediately. Security was called to escort him from the building and revoke all his system access. As he was led out, Ethan stopped beside me. "This isn't over," he muttered low enough that only I could hear. I met his gaze steadily. "Yes, it is." After Ethan's departure, Marcus addressed me directly in front of the board. "Hope I owe you a public apology. You built this product from the ground up, led this team with integrity, and saved us from a disastrous acquisition by CompTech that would have destroyed everything we've built. I failed to trust you when I should have." The apology was unexpected and deeply appreciated. "Thank you," I said simply. "What matters now is where we go from here." By late afternoon, Marcus had sent a company-wide email explaining what had happened. Not all the details, but enough for everyone to understand that the demo failure had been deliberate sabotage and that I had been wrongly blamed. My team gathered around my desk when I returned to the office. Some looked ashamed for having doubted me, others relieved to see me back. Blake stood quietly at the back of the group, a small smile of satisfaction on his face. "We have work to do," I told them. "BuyerTech deserves to see what our platform can really do." Marcus contacted Richard Hamilton that evening, providing a carefully worded explanation of what had transpired. To my surprise, Richard agreed to a second meeting. Not a full recommitment, but willingness to see a genuine demonstration. He was impressed by the audit logs, Marcus explained. Said any company with that level of security tracking was worth a second look. We spent the next week preparing a new demonstration, transparent, honest, focused on our actual capabilities without embellishment. I led every aspect of the preparation, working closely with the team to ensure everything was perfect. When the day came for the second presentation, I stood confidently before the BuyerTech executives, including a now more curious Richard Hamilton. "Thank you for giving us another opportunity," I began. "Today you're going to see the real TechVision platform. No scripts, no tricks, just the technology we've built and the problems it solves." The demonstration proceeded flawlessly. Every feature performed exactly as designed. The AI learning algorithms that had particularly interested Richard operated beautifully, demonstrating how they adapted to new customer interaction patterns in real time. When I concluded, Richard nodded thoughtfully. This is significantly more impressive than what we saw last time, he acknowledged. And more importantly, it's genuine. The BuyerTech team asked tough questions, tougher than before, but I answered each one transparently, acknowledging limitations where they existed, while highlighting our strengths. As they were leaving, Richard pulled me aside. "Integrity matters more than perfection, Miss Anderson," he said. "Your company just demonstrated both. We'll be in touch." 2 days later, BuyerTech reopened acquisition discussions. The terms would need to be renegotiated, but they were back at the table, with the stipulation that I would remain in a leadership position post-acquisition. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The product I had built would survive, my team would be taken care of, and the truth had prevailed. 3 months later, I sat in my new office, larger, and with a better view befitting my new role as Chief Product Officer of TechVision, now a division of BuyerTech. The acquisition had closed at $142 million, more than the original offer, largely due to the additional security features I had implemented, including the audit log system that had exposed the sabotage. The transition hadn't been easy. For weeks after the confrontation with Ethan, I struggled with anxiety before presentations, half expecting something to go catastrophically wrong. The betrayal had left deep scars, not just for me but for the entire company. Healing came gradually. Marcus and I rebuilt our relationship through honest communication and a new transparency policy that ensured key information was shared across leadership. He had learned a painful lesson about trust and verification, and I had learned equally valuable lessons about documentation and vigilance. My relationship with the team evolved as well. Some team members needed time to rebuild trust after having doubted me. Others, like Blake and Jennifer, had been promoted for their loyalty and insight during the crisis. We emerged stronger, more cohesive, with a shared experience that bonded us. I made a point of mentoring junior women in the company, sharing what I'd learned about navigating corporate politics and protecting yourself in environments where not everyone wants you to succeed. Document everything became my mantra. Trust your instincts, but verify with evidence. My personal philosophy shifted from naive trust to a more nuanced trust, but verify approach. I became more assertive in meetings, more confident in my technical judgments, and more willing to push back against questionable decisions, all while maintaining the integrity and collaborative spirit that had defined my leadership style. From the beginning, the company culture transformed too. Marcus implemented new policies, emphasizing honesty over politics, including regular anonymous feedback sessions and a commitment to address concerns transparently rather than through back channels. On a personal level, I finally purchased the dream home I'd been saving for, a craftsman bungalow with a garden where I could decompress after intense workdays. My parents visited for a week, and seeing their pride when I showed them my new office helped heal some of the emotional wounds from those dark days. The experience taught me that in the professional world, technical skill and hard work are not always enough. Documentation, attention to detail, and the courage to stand up for yourself are equally important. The audit logs that saved my career weren't just technical tools, they were protection against those who operate in shadows. Ethan, I later learned, had been blacklisted by most major tech companies after the story circulated through industry networks. Comptech denied any official acquisition discussions, but quietly parted ways with 2 executives connected to the scandal. "The real measure of your professional worth isn't what you build," I told a group of new hires during their orientation. "It's the integrity with which you build it. Technology can be copied. Integrity is irreplaceable." As I looked out my office window at the team, I had protected the product I had saved, and the future that now stretched before us all, I felt a sense of peace. The betrayal had nearly broken me, but instead it had made me stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Standing up to powerful people trying to undermine you isn't easy. It's terrifying, isolating, and risky. But the alternative, allowing injustice to prevail, carries a different kind of cost, one paid in self-respect and integrity. Have you ever had to defend yourself with documentation when someone tried to undermine your work? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story helped you think about protecting yourself in the workplace, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more real-life professional experiences. Share this with anyone you know who might be facing similar challenges. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, document everything. Trust your instincts and never be afraid to stand up for the truth.